A gift that's not normal. I put my hands in his brown locks, making him stop. I just started to comb my fingers through them, not wanting to stop, but of course I had to. I would never judge her, or anyone. If you haven't noticed, I have no room to judge. I'm Rouge, that shouldn't and be alive. He continued to walk. Diana, there's a reason why you're alive. I don't know why, but you did, and I love it that you did. A blush crept up my neck. Isn't he just so sweet? I nodded. Okay, we're almost to my house, so just relax. I nodded and rested my head onto his, making a smile appear on my face. We're here. I looked up from playing with Christopher's hair, and my jaw immediately dropped. There stood the most beautiful house I've ever seen. It was a brown, 2-floor house with a stone path to its door and a glorious yard. The good part was that it wasn't too big nor too small. Wow, your house is, it's amazing. Christopher began to laugh. Thanks, I'm not really into that fancy stuff. I giggled, and Christopher began to walk up the stone path. When we reached the door, there was a trunk. My trunk. The trunk? I tapped his head and smiled. That's my stuff. He sucked in his breath, which made me laugh. Oh. He bent down while keeping me on his back and picked up the trunk. Impressive, I'll say. What? Do you expect any less of me? He asked while flexing one of his muscular arms. Wow, someone has a big ego. I could feel Christopher smirk as he opened the door and walked through with me still on his back and my trunk in hand. When we entered the house, my face lit up with delight. The smell of home hit my face and I absolutely enjoyed it. So we're going upstairs to your new room. I nodded as Christopher began to walk up the steps. The wall that the stairs were connected to had pictures all over it. I could recognize some people in them. There were ones with a man and a woman smiling and laughing, with a little boy running around with worms in his hands. I could tell the woman was Harper and the man was Douglas. I had no doubt that the little boy was Christopher. When we reached the top of the stairs, Christopher took a turn and entered a room. He set the trunk by the door and let me down. I looked around and smiled. It was a huge room with not a lot of furniture. And it was very simple too. It had a wardrobe, dresser and a mirror, queen-size bed, nightstand with a lamp, and a desk with a chair and lamp. But I still thought it was amazing. Sorry, the room is bland. I didn't exactly know I was going to be bringing home my mate. I turned to Christopher and smiled. No, it's perfect. It's all I can ask for. He smiled, making my heart race and the urge to trace my fingers on his lips. Get a hold of yourself, Diana. I have question though. He tilted his head in an adorable way. Is this your room? Christopher smirked. No, but it can be if you want it to. A blush crept up my neck. He began to laugh. I'm kidding, Diana. I just thought you'd want to have your own room because, you're a little shy. I nodded. Thank you. He gave a generous smile and turned towards the door. Sorry, but I have to get ready for my ceremony. Wait, I said. Am I going to that? He turned to me with a sorrowful look. I'm sorry, but that's against the rules. It's forbidden. I was lucky that I could get you to stay. I nodded, but I couldn't help but feel a little bit disappointed. I really wanted to see Christopher get appointed as Alpha. He turned back around and made his way out the room. I'll see you when I get back from it, though. I nodded, even though he wasn't in the room anymore. Then I went to the bed and slumped in it. I really wanted to see that ceremony. Yeah, me too. Hey, Diana, Christopher called out. Yeah? There was a pause before he answered. Do you know how to tie ties? I began to giggle. Yeah, why? Do you need help? Another pause. Yeah. No, well, maybe. Yeah, I do. Can you come to my room and help me? It's the room next to yours. Yeah, okay. I stood from the bed and made my way out of the room and into the next one. When I entered Christopher's room, my jaw nearly dropped. He was in there in a dark dress shirt and dark pants with some nice dress shoes on. He was facing a mirror trying to put his tie on, which was awfully tangled. He sure does change fast. I made my way to him and stopped right in front of him. Then I reached for his tie and began to work my magic. You really fail at ties, don't you? He nodded and laughed. Yeah, they're not my specialty, but hey, you can do it right. I cocked my eyebrow and continued to do the tie. So you're going to keep me here to do your ties? And I thought the forest was bad. He began to laugh as I finished. Okay, I'm done. He looked into the mirror and smiled. Thank you, my princess. I blushed. It's the least I can do. He laughed and began to walk out of his room with me in pursuit. I think I might be late. He began to walk down the stairs and to the door. Of course, I followed him. He opened the door and I held it for him. I'll see you when I get back. I nodded. Yes, sir. He laughed and walked outside, following the stone path to the street. When he was out of sight, I shut the door and slid down it until I was sitting on the floor. What am I going to do the whole time while he's gone? Chapter 7. It's been 30 minutes already and Christopher was still gone. All I had the urge to do was sneak into the building where the ceremony was being held at and watch the appointing of Alpha. But of course I couldn't. Why? Well, 1, I have no idea which building it was in this huge town, and 2, it was forbidden. I got up from my new bed and stood in front of the dusty mirror, looking at my reflection, or if you can even call it a reflection. It just looked like a blurred blob, but I could still make out some features. I still had dirt smudged on me, my hair was a rat's nest, my blue dress was wrinkled, and oh yeah, I was still wearing an apron. I went over to my trunk, which Christopher had so kindly sat by my door, and started to dig through it. I had the basics, all of my books, pictures burned by the edges, all of my mother's, old dresses, old shoes, undergarments, and my favourite, my old doll from my childhood. I quickly grabbed one of Mum's dresses, which was pink, and some undergarments. Then, I stood up and went out into the hallway. Diana, what you doing? Oh, nothing, just looking for a bathroom. I could feel my wolf sigh as I walked down the hallway. I stopped at Christopher's bedroom door. If this is his bedroom, then the room across must be a bathroom. I swirled around to the door opposite of Christopher's and reached for the handle. I began to peer inside it as I slowly opened the door. A sink with a brush? White. A toilet? Check again. Mirror and tub? Check and check. Shower? Gah. I fisted the air and scrambled into the bathroom. Then I checked Christopher's shower for necessities. All was in order when I saw shampoo, conditioner, body wash, and a razor. Oh, thank gosh. A razor. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd been shaving for the past 3 years, but not with a razor blade. No, I used a freaking hunting knife. I don't recommend that because it hurts like crazy. I quickly turned the hot water on, stripped from my clothes, and jumped into the shower. Gosh, it felt good. The hot water hitting my back, releasing tension from my muscles. It just felt so relaxing. I squeezed some shampoo into my hand and began to scrub my hair. Maybe after this I'll have shiny hair again. I shook my head and began to wash my body with, wait for it, body wash. And boy, it sure did smell good. I let the water rinse all the soap from my body and reached for the razor. Are we even allowed to use this? I nodded. Don't worry, I'll make sure to clean it and put it back where it was. And so, I began to shave my legs and my underarms. When I finished, my body felt so silky. But I still had one more step. Conditioner. I squeezed some into my hand and began to scrub my hair. I could feel some of the knots come undone, but not a lot. Once I was done, I let the water rinse the conditioner out of my hair. Then I turned off the water and grabbed a towel that was hanging beside the shower. Once I was done drying myself, I quickly grabbed my undergarments and put them on. I stepped out of the shower and grabbed the brush from the sink. You could imagine what I did next. I brushed my rat's nest. When I finished, I looked into the mirror. I jumped out with surprise. Why? I had forgotten what I looked like over the 3 years. It was just surprising to see a clear reflection at all. My eyes, they were electric blue. I'd forgotten that colour. And my hair, dirty blonde. I looked pretty skinny though, probably from all those years scavenging for food. I smiled as I lifted my hands to my face. This is me. This is what I look like. I reached for Mum's pink dress and slipped it on. I glanced into the mirror before I left the bathroom with my dirty clothes. Only one thought came into my mind. I sort of looked like Mum. So now what? I paced back into my room and shoved the dirty laundry into my trunk. Then I quickly made my way through the hallway and down the steps. I don't know. How long have we been in the shower? There was a pause before my wolf answered. Around 45 minutes. I stopped in my tracks. It didn't feel like 45 minutes, more like 5 minutes. But if it's been that long, then that means it's been an hour and 15 minutes and Christopher still wasn't back. My wolf whined. I don't like being alone. I nodded. Neither do I. I walked to the door and slowly reached for the door. What are you doing now? I grasped the handle and opened the door to outside hesitantly. A warm breeze blew in through the door, and the sounds of birds chirping filled my ears. I smiled slightly and took a step outside. Are we even allowed outside? I ignored my wolf and shut the door behind me. Then I began to walk down the stone path to the street. When I reached the end of the stone path, I looked both ways of the road. Houses were outlining the sides, as were some cars and parked bikes, but there was no one to be seen. Go back inside. I shook my head. Oh, I just want to look around the village. Well, more like a town. My wolf snapped back. You're an idiot. It is a town. This is Bleak Falls in North Carolina, which means there is a huge possibility humans can be around here. I shook my head. First of all, how do you even know that we're in a town called Bleak Falls? And two, how do you know if it's even in North Carolina? My wolf didn't answer. Well, okay. For the first question, it's a wolf thing. We automatically know where we are. And for the second question, it's common sense. Our village was here. I shook my head. Whatever. Oh, since you know where we automatically are, can you find anything like a pond or a park or something like that? But Diana, my wolf whined. No buts, come on, don't be a wuss. My wild whined some more before budging. Fine. Head left down the street, then take a right, near a building with 2 bikes in front of it. Don't ask how I know that there are some bikes, it's a wolf thing. Well then. I sighed and took the directions my wolf told me. I exited Christopher's yard, followed the street until I found the house with 2 bikes and, of course, took a right. After turning on the house, I froze. There was a park, and boy was it huge. Swing sets, monkey bars, tire swings, playgrounds, it was all there. But the scary part was that there was no one to be seen. We should just turn back Diana. I shook my head. No. I'm in the mood for some slides and monkey bars. Don't be afraid. My wolf sighed as I began to trudge to the park. In my head, I was thinking, oh boy. So much fun, but my face was probably giving off the feeling, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. When I reached the park, I just stood there, looking around. There really was no one else here. Then I quickly scurried over to the monkey bars. Diana, what on earth are you doing? I began to climb up and swing off the bars. What does it look like? I'm having fun. My wolf sighed as I continued to play. It was just hilarious and fun and, wow, I haven't done this in a while. I then moved to the slide and began to climb up it and have the time of my life. What are you doing? I froze midway up the slide. Oh, please tell me they're not talking to me. Hello, barefoot girl in the pink dress, I'm sort of talking to you. I looked down at my feet, then hung my head. I really was barefoot. Idiot. I turned slowly to the person who was talking. It was a girl around my age, with long brown hair with some blonde highlights at the tips, freckles, and hazel eyes. She was wearing a purple tank top, jeans, and boots. Well? She placed a hand on her hip and cocked her head to the side with a smile. Can you not speak? I shook my head. I was having fun. Her smile got bigger and she began to giggle. Well, obviously, I was just wondering why you weren't at the alpha ceremony. It was my turn to cock my head. Wait a minute, why aren't you at the alpha ceremony? She held up her hands and began to laugh. It's the after-party thing. I usually don't go to those things. I smiled. Well, that might be the reason why I'm here too. She smiled and held out her hand. Well, stranger, my name is Melanie. I slid down the slide and hesitantly took her hand. I'm Diana. She continued to smile. You know, I haven't seen you around here before, but you look familiar. I nodded. I'm sort of new here, so you wouldn't know me. She released my hand. Yeah, but you actually look sort of familiar. No, I just got here today, so... She snapped her fingers. That's it. You're the sheik the alpha brought here. I backed up, but she followed. So what are you to him? Sister, cousin, mate? I felt a blush creep up my neck. Then she began to laugh. I'm sorry, I'm just yanking your chain. So, when do you start school? I released a breath. I had no idea I was holding. Monday. She smiled but then frowned. How are we supposed to go shopping before then? Is this chic serious? My jaw dropped. Shopping. She nodded. It's obvious you don't have much clothes, she said while pointing to my dress. It's cute, but it's tattered. I can fix that. But for now, you can borrow some of my clothes. We look to be about the same size. I shook my head. What if I'm some kind of murderous villain and kill you? She laughed. Well, then that's my fault. But I want to be your new best friend, deal? She held out her hand. I smiled and took it. Deal. She laughed and pulled me to the swings. She took one, and I took the other beside her. So, where are you from? I looked down at my feet and frowned. Do I just tell her? No, it might ruin the friendship. I shook my head and looked towards her with a slight smile. Somewhere far from here. She narrowed her eyes and was about to say something before we heard clearing of a throat. I froze as Melanie began to laugh. So I bring home some food for a lovely lady, but my house ends up being empty. Then I follow her scent. And where does that take me? The park, I should have known. I relaxed and turned towards a smiling Christopher. Melanie turned and bowed. Alpha. But then she started to crack up. I'm sorry, I can't take this, it's too much. Christopher shook his head while smiling. Sooner or later, you're going to have to accept it. Melanie tried to stifle her laugh but failed miserably. You? Alpha. Gosh, it's too much. I began laughing along with Melanie, catching Christopher's attention. What, is it so hard to believe that this sexy thing, he gestured to himself, is Alpha? Melanie and I laughed harder, causing Christopher to shake his head. Fine, I'll just eat your cake when we get home. That's when Melanie stopped. Wait, you guys live together? I stopped laughing. Oh crap. She's onto us. Her eyes clouded over, as did Christopher's. Great. They were mind-linking each other, leaving me out of the conversation. A moment later, their eyes went back to normal, and they both smiled. Then, Melanie got off her swing and tackled me from mine. Oh my gosh. You're the Luna. You're Christopher's mate. I blushed. Hey now, let's not get too hasty. She laughed, but then frowned. Then embraced me in a hug. But your pack is gone. I'm so sorry, Diana. He told her. Why? Don't worry, she continued. I'll keep your secret. I smiled and hugged her back. Thank you. And besides, she said, you were accepted into the pack by the Alpha, so you're not a Rouge anymore. My eyes widened. Yes? Really? They both nodded, and Christopher answered. Really? I smiled and got up off my butt. Then I ran over to Christopher and embraced him in a hug, catching him off guard. Thank you so much. A moment later, I felt his arms wrap around my waist, pulling me impossibly closer. Anything for you, he whispered. Chapter 8. We spent another hour at the park with Melanie before we went our separate ways. And it turns out, Melanie and I have a lot of things in common. For example, we both love books, especially Percy Jackson, but when we started to talk about the second series with the Romans, she showed a face of disgust. I would have pointed out that she was wearing their colours, but I didn't really want to risk it. So I'd have to ask her later about that though. But, seriously, she's just so much fun. So, do you like Melanie? Christopher asked as we were walking home. I turned to him and smiled. Yeah, she's just so much fun, she's a really sweet girl. He smiled and continued to walk with me beside him. I really can't wait to meet her mate though. They must be so cute together. He frowned. She hasn't met her mate yet, which is weird, because she's nice and talks to everyone here. I always thought she would have found hers before me. I nodded and continued to walk with Christopher. But then, something occurred to me. I stopped and grabbed Christopher's hand, making him stare at me in confusion. What is it? I stared at my feet. I was wondering if we could establish a link. There was a pause, and for a second there I thought he was going to say no. But then he began to pull me along. Of course, let's go do it in the yard. I smiled as we walked back to the house. He pulled me into the yard, and we both sat down in the grass. Okay, so you do know how to do this, right? I nodded. Sorta, I think. He laughed, and his eyes clouded over. I followed his lead by doing the same thing, but nothing happened. We both stopped simultaneously. Then he gave me a confused look. It seems that something is blocking our connection. I shook my head. Something's wrong with our connection. I don't understand. He smiled. Well, do you talk to your wolf? I nodded. All the time. He began to stroke his imaginary beard, which caused me to laugh. Were you accepting me in? Like, you're trying to establish a connection with me? I nodded. He tilted his head back and looked up at the sky. Well, I guess the only other reason is because you might not know your wolf's name. But that's retarded, right? I didn't answer. Instead, a blush appeared on my cheeks. Name? Why would I need that? I didn't have to know it for my pack. He looked at me and began to laugh. Well, you didn't have to know it before, because you were basically born with that connection to your pack. My blush got redder as I shook my head. So what do I do now? I could tell he was deep in thought. Well, I've never heard of this happening before, so I guess you should try to make a stronger connection with your wolf. Then I guess you'll find out her name. He ended it as a question which gave me doubt, but I still nodded. Okay, I'll try. He smiled. All right then, concentrate really hard. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I can do this. It shouldn't be too hard. You know when it's sunny outside and you have your eyes closed, but you can still see the light? Yeah, well, it was like that for a couple of minutes, but then I was engulfed in total darkness. I could look around and see hardly anything. It was like I was in a different world. I looked down where my feet were supposed to be, and there they were. I lifted my hands to see them, and they were there too. I know it sounds crazy, but it was like a world of darkness in my head. But I knew I was actually outside in Christopher's yard with him telling me to concentrate, but I couldn't hear him anymore. Over here, come on. My wolf? I turned and saw a small light erupting from the darkness. I quickly began to run towards it, but it felt like each step I took it got farther away. Just concentrate on me. Follow my voice. I nodded and pushed myself to run farther. I began to make progress because the light started to get closer. When I was almost there, I stretched my arms towards it, trying to grasp it. But I could barely see because it was so bright, so I shut my eyes and kept reaching. You're here. I opened my eyes slowly to see a room covered in white. On the other end, opposite of me, a girl my age was standing there. In fact, she looked exactly like me, except she had brown hair. She even had my electric blue eyes. So you're finally here, she said with a smile. I tried to speak, but it felt like my lips were glued together. It's fine, you can't speak in here, it's impossible. I cocked my head as she began to laugh. I can, because this is where I belong. You, on the other hand, you don't belong here. I shook my head in confusion. I know it's confusing, she started. But that's how this was made. I nodded, then cocked my eyebrow. Oh, right. Well, I guess you can call me your wolf, you always have. So this was her. My wolf. I nodded again. She took a step towards me and smiled. And sorry about your mind-linking problems, I guess that's both of our faults. We never had a proper connection, but I can fix that. I narrowed my eyes as she took more steps until she was right in front of me. You're acting like you don't trust me. I shook my head. Well, do you? Did I trust her? My own wolf. We've been together for a while, well actually my whole life so far. I nodded, causing her to give a sweet smile. Okay, good. She hugged me, catching me off guard. But the strange thing was, I could actually feel her warmth. She felt as warm as you do when you shift. But then something weird began to happen. She was dissolving. It looked like my body was absorbing her. My eyes widened with fear. But then I heard her voice in a tiny whisper. It's okay, I'm making the connection. She kept dissolving until she was completely gone. At first I thought I had somehow killed her, but then her body reappeared. The connection is complete now. I nodded, but then cocked my eyebrow. When you leave, you'll know my name, or, if you want, I can go ahead and tell you now. I nodded in confirmation. Well, my name is... She was cut off by a voice. Just concentrate. Breath in and out. Christopher. I heard him, but I could tell he wasn't physically talking even though I couldn't see him. You guys are connected now, the girl said while looking up. Looks like our time of talking face to face is up. She took a step back. I tried to reach for her, but my feet and arms wouldn't move. Then, everything started to disappear, and the girl started to fade. But you should know something, Diana, she said. You have a gift, don't forget that. Then she disappeared. Everything started to vanish until I saw light seeping through a wall. So I did one thing I could think of. I opened my eyes. Christopher was laying on his back looking at the sky while picking grass and throwing it. I couldn't help but smile. Horse. He quickly sat up and looked at me. Well? I nodded. I saw her. He cocked his head. Or who? My wolf, of course. His eyes widened. Are you sure? But that's impossible. I nodded. She looked exactly like me, except she had brown hair. He ran his hand through his brown locks. Wow, I've never heard of someone seeing their actual wolf. I shrugged. Then I guess I'll go down in history. He laughed. He laughed. So, did you find out her name? I nodded. Yeah, she didn't exactly tell me it, but I can feel it. He nodded, as if to tell me to continue. Her name is Sophia. Wow, he said, astonishment showing on his face. That's a beautiful name. I couldn't help but blush. So, do you want to try the mind link? I asked, trying to change the subject. He smiled and nodded. Of course. At the same time, our eyes clouded. Diana? Yeah? He began to chuckle. Great. It works. Now that it's official, we don't necessarily have to go the full length. The full length? I really have no idea what you mean. Okay, I'm going to end the link, then I'll show you. A moment later, the link was ended. My eyes weren't clouded anymore, so I could see perfectly, which meant I could see Christopher smiling at me. Are you ready? I nodded. His eyes didn't cloud, but I could hear his voice inside of my head. See what I mean? My jaw dropped. Why, your eyes aren't even clouded. He laughed, and I really mean he actually laughed, as in, he moved his mouth. See, it's just like the link with your family and friends. We don't have to go the full length. I nodded and smiled. You want to know what I'm in the mood for? He cocked his eyebrow. What? I gave him a knowing smirk. I want my cake. So help me up. He laughed. He laughed. You know, you're more confident in mind links. I blushed. What do you mean? I take that back, he said linked while helping me up. You're as shy as ever. I slapped his arm and ended the link. You know, you're too cocky for your own good. He continued to smirk as we walked over to the door. And you're too adorable for your own good. He opened the door, and the sense of my new home welcomed me. Chapter 9. Wow, you really like cake. I looked up from my absolutely delicious cake and gave a smile filled with mostly icing and cake crumbs. I haven't had it for 3 years. What do you expect? Christopher laughed and took some icing from my cake. Oh no, he didn't. I'm sorry, when I'm eating, you don't take my food. Even if it's just a little bit. What on earth do you think you're doing? I asked sternly. He froze with the icing inches from his mouth. Eating cake. I shook my head ferociously. Not just any cake. Why cake? You know I could sue you for that. Do you want to go to prison? Do you want to rot in a cell for the rest of your life? His mouth twitched upwards a little. What? Do you want your precious icing back? I nodded. I don't just want it. I need it. He laughed and smeared the icing on my nose. There, now you have it back. My eyes widened. Yes? Do you know what you just did? You killed it. How am I supposed to eat it now? He began to smirk. I can still eat it. He can what? I stood from my new bed, placing the cake that was on a plate down gently, and began blushing. What are you talking about? He began to laugh and stood up. Gosh, Diana, you're so gullible. I narrowed my eyes at him. I don't trust you. He put his hand over his heart and gave a look of mock hurt. Ouch, you're so harsh. I laughed, and soon enough